Somehow and when we believe in Satan, bright shining as no sound that we first Light flushing. Is okay? I'm loud inside. Yeah. Some ghosts. Kennedy. It's a rock and roll band. For you, so.
Light.
Perfect. Table? You might be reflecting the candlelight.
It's reflection.
Here, does this help you?
Yeah.
I'll hide it for you.
The light is gone. No more. You had divine presence and the light are now gone.
One second, let me get this adjusted so we have.
Some water. You have water? Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
Those days are yet to come.
It's dry weather here.
Perfect, Swami. So let me introduce Swami. Not that he needs any introduction from me, that's for sure. Well, I want to welcome everybody here and everybody in YouTube land to our beautiful, spontaneous kind of amazing surprise of having Swami Chidbrahmanandaji. I had a pleasant call from Swami Chidbrahmanandaji, and he said, "Yes, we have somebody coming to visit you." And he was supposed to only be here for a day, and I didn't implored him to extend his stay and give us a couple of days if he could, and he graciously said yes. So we're so happy to have him today. Swami Chidbrahmanandaji's, he'll give you his life story. Just coming from Colorado, he did some kind of an experimental center. He'll tell you all about that, I'm sure. Going on to be the lone monk on the top of the mountain in Santa Barbara. So if you want to go up to the mountain to see the wise man, then you can do that coming up. But thank you so much for coming. So I really appreciate it, and thank you all.
Wow. Now I'm excited about me. All right. Well, I didn't prepare anything because that's sort of the rule. Yeah. Is there anything in particular anybody wants to ask?
Would you?
Otherwise, I'll just jump in and then roll.
If you want to tell them about your, I'm sure they're all interested to hear your life and how you became a monk, and they want to know you.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, yes. So I was born in New York, or at least part of me was, and then immediately was moved to Germany and raised in Germany until I was 13. And I came back to the States. I was raised a fundamentalist Christian. My family's history goes back to 1749 in Pine Knot, Arkansas, of all places. And every firstborn son of every generation has been a minister. And so the weight on my shoulders was clear. I was the firstborn in our family. And so I went to seminary to basically become a missionary to West Berlin, is what I was planning on at that time. But as those classes went on, the Christianity that I was familiar with, and I've since learned a lot about that in my own tradition. And if I'd known now what I had known then, I would have realized that I wouldn't have had to go through all the trauma. That Jesus was bigger than I had ever imagined. And that didn't come back to me, or that didn't come to me probably until my 14th year in the monastery, something like that. I was in, how did I get in the monastery? That was a job. I took a trip to India in 1999, and I went with my friend at the time, partner at the time, Philip, to take darshan of Pravrajaka Mokshaprana. Now at that time I had no idea about anything. I was not a Vedantist. I was, after I had a rather violent parting of the way with my Christianity in 1990. And after that, I was quite disillusioned. My last prayer to God after that rather traumatic event was, I gave you my first 20 years of my life, and I tried to do what was right, and this is what it has come to. And I said, I'm not going to pray again to you. I'm done. And the next 20 years of my life are mine. And I will do what I please. I thought I was onto something. I only made it 8 years. I didn't make it a full 20 before I really got some very beautiful, deep, painful, but important lessons in life. By giving myself full permission to explore whatever I thought I needed to explore, to find out whatever I thought I needed to find out, to do whatever I thought I needed to do. And really, it was a very hard thing to do for myself because I was very restricted and constricted within myself from my upbringing. And to give that permission to myself took a lot of courage because it led me some very dangerous places, some very painful places. But Mother, fortunately, was waiting at the end of that. When I went to India in '99, I went as a tourist. I had no interest in spiritual life at that point. I was a rather active hedonist, but a rather bitter one at that point, because that's what happens. A worldly mind makes you a very unkind, a very cruel, a very selfish, bitter person. Can. I had kind of arrived, I had definitely arrived at that place in my life when I decided to join my friend Philip on his trip to India. And we had a conversation. It's funny because I just told the story a few minutes ago, but we had a conversation before we went because he was a Vedantin, and we had shared an apartment for about 5 years at that point. And he would get up and go into his closet every morning and do the practice. He'd set up a little shrine in there. I didn't ask him questions. I thought it was hilarious myself that he'd go and lock himself in the closet every morning for an hour. And then when he got off work, he was a school teacher. He would come home at the end of the day and he would go in there for another hour, hour and a half and sit. And in the 5 years that we shared that place, he never, ever proselytized me or told me anything about it or that I should anything. And I didn't ask any questions because I didn't want any of it. I had no interest whatsoever. I was rather intrigued. He had a picture of beloved Mother. It wasn't a flattering picture, though. I don't know if you know of it. There's a picture of her on a covered wagon. And in the picture, she's tiny. She's like about that big in the picture. And she's flanked by 2 women. And she's sitting there. And when you see the picture in its normal form like that, you can't see much of her at all. But what Philip had done was taken her, that little tiny her on the wagon chair, and blown it up to a poster. So you got only her, and you saw what a weird picture this was. She being my mom, was so out of it. Her one eye is sort of looking off this way, and the other eye is sort of drifting that way. She's sitting there, her hands are, you could tell that she put them in a purposeful position when she started, but they had kind of slipped into a thing, and her head is kind of off a little bit. But the thing is that that picture hung in his room above his bed, and for 5 years, and I wondered every single time I looked in there and saw that picture. Why and who?
What is happening?
What is going on with this crazy picture? But I was intrigued because I could see something very, 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 what would be the word? Very stationary in that picture, very still. That I realized that after looking at it for 5 years, that I couldn't really ever see it enough. That there was enough intrigue and enough drawing me into that picture. I was always very curious about it, but never investigated. So I went to India. We had agreed that when he went to do something spiritual like that, if he was going to go to an ashram or see one of his Swami folks or whatever, that he would just tell me in the morning and I would make my own plan for the day. So the third day that we were there, he said, I'm going to go see this woman, sadhu, who's purported to be enlightened. She's having darshan. And, I'm going to go see her. And I said, oh, that's curious. I said, what do you mean that she's enlightened? What does that mean? And he said, well, she's had the God experience. And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean by the God experience? What's that? And he says, well, I guess she's seen God. And I busted out with a chuckle, and he didn't chuckle. And I looked at him and I said, Philip, are you telling me in this day and age somebody is still saying that? And he's like, yeah. And I said, and you believe it. And he said, well, I believe it enough to be curious about it. I want to go just see her for darshan. I said, well, what is a darshan anyway? And he said, well, she's just making herself available, ask questions or do whatever we want there. And so we went to, she was Moksha Prana, if you don't know, was the president of the Sharda Mat. None of this did I know at the time. And we went over for that darshan, and we went into the room. It was a room about the size of your living room, kitchen area there. And she was sitting at a desk at the front of the room, facing sideways. And there were several people sitting around the floor in there. I'm sure all of you have been to a darshan. You probably know there's some people singing, and some people meditating, and some people who might as well have been at the shopping center. But just a bunch of stuff going on, and I'm sitting there in the chair, staring at this woman who's meditating in front of me, because they put two chairs, the only chairs in India, they put right in front of her desk for me and Philip, to feel utterly not uncomfortable at all, with all of that attention and being set in the front of the room, in front of these people, and me especially, because I was just there just for the kicks, for the fun of it, and I felt very odd about that. But I was sitting there staring at her as she was meditating. I don't know what I was looking for, just some indication that a person is seeing God, a halo, emitting a spark here and there every now and then. I had no idea, but I was looking for something that would say this is a woman that was special enough for all these people to come and see. And at her feet were on a little tiny stool. She was sitting like this, and there was a woman there in the most beautiful sari. Of course, all saris are beautiful, especially when you're first seeing them for the first time. Just in this beautiful sari, 1,000 bracelets on her arms, her hair done beautifully with all kinds of little chains and bangles in it. I mean, she was really done to the nines. And she was in tears, and she was building a flower petal mandala around Moksha Prana's feet. And I was kind of watching Moksha Prana, taking in the whole scene of the room, and I decided there was really nothing special in the way that I was looking for in Moksha Prana. Just decided she's just a sweet grandmotherly type person. So I relaxed and sat back in my chair. And this part, when I started off with all this, I would never tell this story, and then I started telling it, and then I started getting excited about telling it. And I know that one shouldn't really share these stories, so I'm telling you this story, kind of knowing that, and hoping that I don't ruin my mind with it. But nonetheless, it was a beautiful thing, and it started everything in my life, and I couldn't explain being here without this story. So I had been staring at her, and when I just kind of relaxed and sat back, she came out of meditation, and so she was again facing 90 degrees from me. And she was in deep meditation, kind of like this, and sort of slumped slightly. And she lifted her head very slowly and opened her eyes. And then she turned her head and made eye contact with me. And this is where it gets utterly inexplicable to me. Because suddenly I was nowhere. And by nowhere, I mean it was dark. I could see nothing. I could hear nothing. I could feel nothing. I was nowhere. Just that's the best description. I was nowhere. I couldn't even put hands together. Like I felt like I was complete, like I was whole, but there was no body there. But I couldn't see. So I'm sitting in that state, and it happened all of a sudden. And obviously that had never happened before. to me. So I was sort of just trying to keep it together, like, okay, what's going on here? And just about the time that panic was not going to stay down anymore, suddenly a light comes on, and I'm sitting, or the sensation is that I'm sitting at the back of a stage, and I look down, and there's a stool where I am, but again, there's no body there. There's just a point of reference, which I really didn't know what to do with that at that point, but I was looking around, and I was on a stage, and all of the pieces of the stage were there. All, in front of me were hanging 7 scrims or curtains, the kind that they use normally in ballet. If they're lit from the front, they're opaque, but if they're lit from the back, they're translucent. You can see through them, and they're used for dream sequences, which is somewhat apropos. And again, I'm sitting there, I'm like very interested. Okay, this is very cool, but still, this is not answering the most important question. How did I get here? Why am I here? And what's going on? And suddenly I know, just as if someone turned a switch on inside and opened up a new hard drive. And suddenly I fully understood that this stage was my body. That the scrims were my attributes, the sound systems were my ears and my mouth, and that I performed my life, my story, to this theater, which was a beautiful theater. It was red velvet seats and gilt boxes out there, and there were no people there. I was like, don't have an interesting life, apparently. But that's what I understood from that. I was very excited because, my internal world, I didn't know anything about how I was put together. And I had never really actually wondered how I was put together, but I knew that I didn't know. And suddenly I knew, and suddenly I could feel it, and suddenly it was clear, this is real, this is what's really happening. And I began looking around with fascination at the whole setup and learning all about all this stuff just becoming apparent within me. And at some point, Moksha Prana appears at the light. The light that came on, I don't know, for those of you who are familiar with theaters in the West, for some reason, when the theater is empty or when nobody is there, there's a light, a bare bulb light that's kept on the front center of the stage that keeps the light on. It's some sort of superstition, which I don't know the full story behind. But that's the story, that's the light that went on. And Moksha Prana suddenly was standing next to that light. And she comes walking across the stage to me without disturbing any of the curtains or anything. She was almost like on another, if you had one of those overhead projectors and you write something on a separate piece of plastic, you can put it over everything else and it blends in, but it's not part of it. And that's sort of the feeling that I got as she came walking toward me. And she came toward me, and she came to, and this part is so important to me, because it gave me an understanding and an insight that I have used several times when reading the scriptures or looking at some of Thakur's experiences, in that, while I'm telling you this story, all of it's happening in my head, right? I'm remembering and seeing very clearly that day. This experience with Moksha Prana has not diminished in the slightest in the last 26 years. I mean, when I sit and think about it, it is as pristine and original as it was the first time I told the story. But when I tell this story, I can't give that to you. That's the best part. That's the part that literally put me in a monastery, because I had that experience with Moksha Prana. We were in India for 6 weeks. When I came back from that trip to India, I looked up the Vedanta Center in San Francisco, made an appointment with Swami Chidbrahmananda for the first time, and told him I wanted to join the monastery, and he laughed in my face. He literally goofed. If he had false teeth, he would have spit them out. But he goofed on and looked at me, and he said, "Why would you ever want to do such a thing?" And so I told him this story, and he was very kind of grave, kind of quiet after that. Over the next 10 days, had me jump through hoops, call me at this time, visit me at this time, come hear me lecture at this time. And the last one was, come to the lecture on Sunday, and after the lecture is over, come shake my hand. And so that day I went to the lecture, I went up and I shook his hand, and when I shook his hand, he took the other hand on it. He said, "You can move in the monastery tonight at 8 p.m.
Wow.
Well,
So so I showed up right at 8 p.m. I remember watching my watch, it was a digital watch, waiting for it to get to exactly 8 o'clock. I had my finger on the button. I was like, ding dong. And Swami immediately opened the door, and he said his first words to me. He said, "Ah, you are prompt. That is very good."
Hmm.
And then he called Chagisha Chaitanya, the other brahmachari. He said, "Chagisha, come show your new brother his room."
Oh.
And he took me up to my room there, and I walked into that room with just a suitcase. He had told me to get rid of everything. So I was emptied the savings, sold off all of my assets. I asked him what to do with it all, which was a test, because I was waiting for him to tell me to donate it to the Vedanta Center. And if he'd done that, I would have walked away. But I would have been like, no, that's not how this goes. But he told me, he says, well, why would I care? He said, give it to your friends, throw it on the street, whatever you like. And I was so charmed and encouraged by the pureness, the purity in that answer. You know, they weren't trying to get all of what I was leaving behind. And I moved into the monastery. So I came back from that trip and moved into the monastery, and that just that 10 minutes or however long that experience was with Moksha Prana changed everything. I remember walking at the end of the trip. We were in Rishikesh. We were coming from an Ayurvedic treatment. We were walking through the woods. And that afternoon, we were catching the Dehradun train to go back to Calcutta to catch the plane back to home. And I told Philip, I said, you know, Philip, I said, in my whole life, I have never been inspired to be old. And I said, you know, and on this trip, I've met 5 people. Moksha Prana was one, and then I met 4 other sadhus, monks, of the Ramakrishna order, because we were staying at the centers. 4 of them, each of the 5 gave me a very important piece to my personal puzzle. And I told Philip, I said, you know, all 5 of these people showed me how beautiful life can make a person if it's lived properly. I said, I've never seen eyes like I've seen on this trip. I've never been so touched by people like I have been on this trip. I've never heard such amazing ideas about what life is that were harder to believe than what I've heard on this trip. And I said, I've had this experience that everything I've been shown and taught, I just felt like somebody dug deep into myself and grabbed my aha moments out, organized them, outlined them, wrote an essay, and gave it back to me. I said, because every time somebody taught me something, I knew that I had always known it. The feeling was, yeah, that's it. You know, I could never have said it. I could have never expressed it. But that was the knowing inside. It was like, yes, that's absolutely true. So that's what brought me here. That's what put me in a monastery. Since being in the monastery, first of all, I had no idea what I was doing when I did that. I didn't know what a monk was. My tradition of Christianity didn't have monks. It actually said it was sinful to be a monk. And so I really didn't know what was going on with all of that. So I was really just doing my best, you know, to listen to Swami Prabhupada. I couldn't have gotten a better teacher. Swami Prabhupada was, I don't know if any of you got the opportunity to meet him, but he was stoic, absolute self-control, always the same person. You never got a mood. You never got anything surprising. I only had to look one of 3 spaces to ever find him. He was either in his room studying, on the stationary bicycle in the front room doing his exercise, or in the office with the devotees. There was never anywhere else I had to look for him. And my favorite thing that I like to say about him, in honor of him, how strange it is to live with a person for 15 years and never see them do something for themselves.
Wow.
Not once catch him reading a magazine or playing a video game. Anything. That there was just, and that never seemed like it was the slightest sacrifice for him. His steadiness, his sameness of spirit was always powerful and overflowing. And I really would realize it when he would take every 5 years he would go to India. And when he left that monastery, it became triple hard to be a monk. The energy in the place really changed, and I found everything became an effort. My morning meditations, getting up early enough. I was responsible. That was the one thing I argued with him for 10 years. Was like, Maharaj, why do I have to get up at 5 o'clock and go open the temple next door so the nuns can come in and do the morning worship when Vrajapana lives in the apartment at the front door of the temple and is the one that's doing the worship? Why don't you just have Prabhajaka open the door and let in the nuns instead of having me get up and go over there every day? And I just couldn't understand what that was, and now I know it's because I wouldn't get out of bed otherwise.
This is in LA or?
No, this is San Francisco.
Yeah.
San Francisco. I joined in San Francisco and was there until 2012 when I took my sannyas, and then was posted in Hollywood after that. So that's all of that, I guess. The important thing to me, though, the thing that I really want to talk about is the absolute revolution in what religion is that's happened for me over the years. Mother has just, oh my God, just opened up a vista inside and shown me, that she's been coming for a long time. She's shown me that when she came as Buddha, when she came as Rama, when she came as Krishna, when she came as Jesus, when she came as the Holy Mother, that it was always her. It was always the same presence that has always come. And that because we are egotistical, and the main characteristic of having an ego is feeling separate and apart from the whole. And because we've established those boundaries in ourselves, we establish those boundaries with everything. In the sense, because we're looking at a one without a second. That's what we're witnessing at this moment. But the first thing that's happening is it's getting broken into 5 pieces as it brushes against our 5 senses. And so we immediately think that the unity is a multiplicity, because we've got these 5 different interpretations of it coming in through the senses. And we place those in the mind, and the job of the mind is to take all of these disparate little pieces of information and to try and recreate the one without a second by building relationship lines between everything. And that's what we call learning, and that's what we call growing, and that's what we call an absolutely futile exercise. The mind will never be able to do that. And so Mother was saying, yes, you see, because of that ego, when I came as Buddha, you put a little puddle around him with a fence and called that Buddhism, and said that's Buddha's thing, and that belongs to these people. And then when I came as Rama, you put a little fence around Rama, and you built some stories and some mythologies, and that was for these people. When I came as Jesus, you did the same thing there. She says, you keep doing this, so that all you've got is all these disparate little puddles where a bunch of egos throw themselves into each puddle and then argues with all the other puddles about who's right. And she said, I'm not building a kingdom of puddles. I'm digging a river. I'm digging a river that gets deeper and wider every time I come. And there's a unity to all of it, so that all of these scriptures and all of these practices and all of these teachings can be cross-referenced, can be used to support one another, to inform one another, to go deeper and deeper and deeper and wider and wider and wider, and never ever have you left me in any of them. And I began to get very curious about this idea of this Sanatana Dharma, which I didn't associate it, and more than ever don't associate with any particular religion, even Hinduism. That the Sanatana Dharma is the gem, that is the the one without a second. It is religion itself. And that no one practice can hold the whole gem. And so all of these puddles that Mother threw herself into, each one of them was just a facet of this gem. So the whole gem can be experienced and enjoyed through those practices, through those exercises and traditions. But no one religion can hold the whole, because religion is not plural. Religion is life, and actually the word religion is redundant. That everybody is spiritual, because all of us are being taught by the experiences of our day to day what we are, and what God is, and what love really is. And that this beautiful thing is sitting right there in the middle of everything, and is the most misunderstood and the most misinterpreted thing there's never been, I think. But in doing that, I got curious about the 10th or 12th year in the monastery as to if this was really true, then I should be able to teach the Vedanta using the scriptures of my youth, the Christianity I grew up with. And so I wanted to see if I could do that, if I could teach the Vedanta using only Christian scripture. So I got permission from Abhigyanananda. I was at that time posted at the Washington, D.C. Center. I asked him if I could move up to a monastery in West Park, New York, a Benedictine Christian monastery. And I said I'd like to go up there for a year, and I'd like to study with the monks there and share with them these ideas of Vedanta, and see and make sure that I'm not doing blasphemy or stepping on any of their toes with any of these ideas that I'm finding in the Christian scripture. I thought it was going to be a very difficult thing to do. I thought I was really going to have to dig in there deep, and that's why I wanted these senior Christian monks there that I could check with. It turned out to be the simplest thing I'd ever done. I just opened the Bible. That's all I had to do. And then I realized how Vedanta really works. That you can marry it with any of these traditions, and it gives you the basement. It gives you the root to understand Christianity. And that was stunning to me. That was stunning to me. The first thing that I did was look at the creation story, Adam and Eve in the garden. And I looked at that from the Vedantic perspective. I remember that Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj said that the creation happens every moment, that every moment is new, and that this moment has nothing to do with the previous moment. And that if you took those two snapshots and tried to line them up, not one atom in the universe would be in the same place. That they are not related, that your mind creates the narrative that relates those moments together just like it does in a dream, and takes something that doesn't have a cohesive narrative to it and provides it one. A world that moves and changes, just like in a movie. Each frame, there is no change. There is no movement. There is only a stillness of frame. There's the absolute unchanging. And this moment that we're in right now is that absolute unchanging. And you are this moment. And God is this moment, the I am, just as he gives his name in the Old Testament. When Moses is going to go tell the Pharaoh, yes, you've told me to go tell the Pharaoh to release 3 million slaves. Fine, I'll do it. Who shall I say sent me? Right? Who am I going to tell? And God says, tell him I am who sent you. So this notion that God is this moment, and that he does not change, she does not change, that does not change. There is no change in the moment. Every moment is perfect. God is everywhere present and always perfect. And that just like when your mind sees one frame of the movie and then sees the next frame and sees a distinction between the two, and your mind creates the story of movement to explain that difference, So your karma, your story of your life is your mind's narrative for creating a linear relationship in moments. And because of that, the mind has created a sense of the past and a sense of the future, neither of which are real. They are both conceptual. You can't ever go back and grab them. When you talk about the past, you're doing it again in the present, so you're recreating it. Your memories are very different, vastly different than the things that actually happened. If you ever get a chance to test that, I went and saw a childhood friend that I hadn't seen in a long time. And when we talked about the things that we had done, almost nothing lined up. It was almost like we had had two different relationships. But so this mind creates this sense of story, this idea of a past and an idea of a future, and puts the moment in the middle of it. The problem is, if you have a past and a future, you can't have a present. Because at what point does the future become the past? There is no, it's one of those disappearing things, you know.
It's a circle.
Yeah, there's many ways of thinking it, but it's an isness. It's a point, actually. It's a singular point. And these last 3 years, that's been my big practice, is learning to live on a point and not on a line. And so to refuse my narrative of the moment. And in this moment to realize that this is God and that everything that I'm seeing is God right here. And the method for doing that was, for me, I create tons of experiments. I'm always creating. If I read something in the scriptures that's a little hard to believe, immediately I start thinking of how could I test this? What kind of experiment can I set up so that I can see this? If it's true, you have to be able to see it or experience it. Otherwise, what's the point? And by playing with those things, I came to realize that my waking world is no different than my dreaming world. That at night when I go into my dream, it's exactly what's going on right now. Because everything that we're looking at in the room right now, you're not really seeing the thing itself, right? That light hits your eyes are in a socket that's solid, your brain is in a black box, it's never seen light, doesn't even know what light looks like, has no idea whatsoever. So when you look at that light doesn't get past the back of your eye, it stops right there and gets encoded into messages or into biochemical information, whatever that might be. Probably could tell me about that. And then that goes to the mind, and the mind takes that information and creates a symbol for light, creates a symbol for the information that it got by looking at that or at anything in this room, right? So the mind has never seen light, has never experienced light, does not know what light is. And from Eckhart Tolle, if you can forgive me for using him as a reference, Eckhart Tolle said that one of the first things that he learned in his enlightenment experience was that light and love were the same thing. Light is not a symbol of love. Light is love. And I thought to myself, that means light is the moment, because light is love, love is God, or God is love. Right? And so by knowing that my dream world and my sleeping and my waking world are unreal, that everything that I'm experiencing is a symbol within my own mind, that I assume comes from outside, but cannot verify that. Because my ear, where I think sound comes from, is just as much a symbol for the source of sound as the sound I'm hearing, or think that I'm hearing. And so this world that we live in, you can know, one, the light that you're experiencing right now is the light you are providing. It is the light of your awareness. It's the light that lights your dreams. When it's daytime in your dream, where is that light coming from? There's not a sun between your ears, that's lighting the world for you, right? There's no light bulbs in there. There's no power factory going on. The light that you see in your dreams is the light of awareness, which is love, the expression, the purest expression of God, the light of love. And that in this waking state, it's the exact same thing. And that you are having a constant experience of the love of God. So right now, all of this light embracing you is exactly that. It's the divine embracing you, giving you everything you need to see and to learn and to grow and to express and expand yourself. And so I've really sat in the last few few years just enjoying this knowledge of life, that God is. That God is a noun. God is not a verb. God is the noun of love. God is the noun of wisdom. God is the noun of existence. And why is that important? Because God does not exist. God is existence. God is not loving. God is love. God is not intelligent. God is intelligence itself. You are the verb. You are loving. You are wise. That is our part in this puzzle. By asking the question, who am I? A question that Sri Nishikananda says was never meant to be answered. He said the question, who am I, was never meant to be answered. It was meant to dissolve the inquirer. So that you, with this noun of this divine ideal, pregnant and alive within you come to know your nature. And once you know your nature, you no longer have to wonder, how do I have a fulfilling life? Let your nature express. That's how life becomes fulfilling. Never make what you want the goal of your life, because anything that you focus on to grab will disappear. That's the nature of it. You sit in silence. Do the practice. There's a few things that you have to learn. First of all, you have to learn who you are in a real way, by sitting there in your meditation and watching your thoughts and experiencing watching your thoughts and understanding very clearly you cannot be your thoughts if you are watching them. If you are watching them, by necessity, they are not you. And then you learn the same thing about the body, that the body just informs you constantly. If it was you, it wouldn't have to tell you it was sick by putting that funny little taste in the back of the mouth or that little slight fever behind your eyes. It wouldn't have to tell you that it was getting sick. It would be you. You would already know. And so you become very, very aware, and I mean acutely aware, that you are watching a body and watching a mind. And by knowing that and being able to put them there, don't try and define the self. It can't happen. The self is the one that's making all this happen, that's watching everything. So you can't objectify. And that's what makes spiritual life such a challenge. Is that all of our lives, anything that we wanted to learn, we grab that thing, we put it in front of our senses, and we apply our senses to it and say, okay, this is what it is. In spiritual life, you can't take the subject and put it in front of the senses, because it's the one that's behind all of that. And so that's why you have to do this negation. You have to say, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. And then you come to stumble on something quite beautiful that is self-evident, and that is love. The shock of my life was to find that silence and love are the same. That silence is not emptiness. Silence is the space that makes allowance for words. That space is not emptiness. Space is what makes the allowance for objects. And that silence and space are the encapsulation of an infinite potential for the expression of that divine now, of Satchitananda, that is the divine. And then you, by coming to finally know who you are and what you are, that your only role in this world is silent wonder. To sit in that quietness, because in that silence, deep inside, behind mind, not a silence of the ears, not a silence of the mind, but a silence of what is behind the mind, before the mind. And in that silence, if you can sit there for even a split second without a thought, one of the first things that happens is this beautiful welling up of love, peace within you. That ananda of your nature manifests. And I sat at a lunch one time with one of the senior swamis from Bellarmont. It was very early in my monastic life, and so I have to admit I still can't remember Swami names because they all end in Ananda, so they all sound the same. So I don't remember this Swami's name, but he came to the lunch and he sat down at the lunch table and he started off his conversation with Swami Prabhupada. It was just the three of us at the table. And he told Swami Prabhupada, he says, I've learned a very important thing about desire. And sets his napkin down. And this Swami, he says, I have seen very clearly that when I fulfill a desire, I have the swelling up of a bliss, of a happiness. And it always gets associated with the desire that I had just fulfilled. And I make the mistake of thinking that that fulfillment of the desire gave me bliss. But he says, I've come to see very clearly that when you fulfill a desire, for a very short moment of time, you are without desire. And in that short moment of time, you become aware of your innate nature, your bliss. It comes to the surface. But it will not take the mind very long to formulate a new desire, and suddenly you forget that bliss. And because you associated it with the fulfillment of a desire, now you go and try and fulfill another desire to be happy again. And really the silence of being is what gives you the permanent flow of a bliss that's within you, that you have to share and you give and give and give, and it's infinite. You can give and love as much as a Jesus or a Buddha or a Mama. And that is exactly why they came, was to show you what you are. Maybe a difference in power, Ramakrishna says. You may not be able to do it to the degree that your name is remembered for thousands of years, but you can do it to have a fulfilling life, to know that you lived well, to have confidence, to be fearless, to know that there is nothing that can cross that gulf of body-mind to touch the self. The self cannot be wedded, cannot be burned, cannot be hurt or harmed, ruined or traumatized. That it is ever free, is ever pure, it's ever perfect. It cannot be taken from you. Cannot be taken from you. And if you can just sit in the silence of love and let it express, it will express perfectly. And that will be the fulfillment of that command from Jesus, be perfect as your Father is perfect. Because your will and the divine will have always been the same. It was the division of egoism that didn't allow you to see that unity and that harmony, and that caused you to react toward this will of God and to create a separate being called God that you had to give up everything for some reason, and he got his way in all of it. And what did you get? You got nothing but obedience, right? And in that dynamic, what a horror that was. But to understand that that's utterly the wrong setup of what's happening. To see that you're letting go of ignorance, and as you let go of that ignorance, you become more and more like your nature, more and more like what you've always been. And so you find that freedom. And therein lies the unity of religion. All religions have one function, and that is the annihilation of egoism. That's what all of them do. That's what all of the paths do in their different ways. But I've seen that this unity of religion also applies to the yogas. The yogas, if you write down what each of the different little pieces of scaffolding do in the practice, you can see that's the bhakti is doing that through love, building unity through love and empathy. Jnana is doing it through neti, Raja is doing it through the silence of before mind, practicing getting the mind to quiet down. So when one thought ends before the next one begins, you can see your beloved for a split second in between the two and experience it. And so all religion is just the annihilation of ego. And that annihilation of ego is the removal of the curtain. Maya and egoism are synonyms. They are not different from each other. Your ego, your sense, your insistence on being separate and apart is the only reason that you cannot see beloved in this moment. And so simply letting go of this notion that you're separate is all that it takes. And this is where you borrow from the bhaktas. They get the best deal because they don't have to become perfectly pure like the Jnana does. Jnani does, right? If you can trust the love of that divine love to be enough for you, it will be enough for you. So when you sit there in your mind and you're doing your meditation, anything that comes up to tell you, they link this in with Suzuki in that book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, made a life-changing statement. He says in the first chapter, actually, I think it might even be the first paragraph, he says in there, the Buddhist does not sit to realize God. The Buddhist sits to know that he is already realized. And I thought about that. I thought, what an amazing thing. What if I sit here and assume that I'm realized? And assume that I have all of this joy, and assume that it's all mine, and that there's nothing needs to be done, nothing needs to be changed. What if I just accept that? And anything that my mind brings up to argue with me about it, I silence it with grace, with the reminder, grace is enough for me. I don't have to do that. Grace is enough. Grace is enough. And to use that for your attainment of silence, to use that grace for your attainment of quiet within, and use that wonderful grace to alleviate you from your story. Story, narrative, and egoism are also synonyms. Anytime that you have a story, and this is why I tell people be very careful about the stories that you create for yourself, because if you create the story, you must live it, right? So if somebody comes, one of the way that I'm most cautious about this is always in a group like this, we have a question and answer, and somebody will always come and say, it's always universal, Maharaj, I can't meditate. My mind is so noisy. I'm never going to realize God. It's going to be lifetimes. What is somebody like me supposed to do? And oh my God, my heart breaks. I cringe. I feel this contraction. I'm like, oh my God, my sweet, sweet person. The first thing that you don't do is to write a narrative like that about yourself. Because if you sit there telling yourself that it's hard to meditate, every time you sit down to meditate, it's going to be hard for you to meditate. You've defined it already. It's like you've got to break these narratives, because the narrative is the delusion. If you sit there to do your practice and you think that from that practice you're going to attain something, or that you're going to get something, or you're going to achieve something, you will never have it, because you sit to know it's already yours. And anything in your body-mind that argues with that is silenced by love, by your conviction of love. And when you know that and you accept that, the bliss of your enlightenment is instantly available to you, instantly yours to be enjoyed. So anytime you catch yourself telling a story about yourself in any form, about anything, stop. That's living on a line. You do not live on a line. You have only ever experienced a point, this point, the here, the now, the beloved God, this moment. And in that moment, you will find your unity with God. You will find that you are a light of awareness that has never changed, never moved, never experienced any kind of discontent at all. And through that light runs the film strip of time. And that time will play through the mind and reflect on the screen of the mind. A flash of creations, a sequence of creations, all of them new, all of them infinite, all of them free. And your mind will try and link them all together in a narrative that it can manage, in a narrative that's small enough for it to feel secure as a body mind, in a narrative that will lessen the pain of unknowing. Because if we in this moment paid attention to what was really our situation, we would all be running around in here screaming right now with our hair disheveled, being like, oh my God, an asteroid's going to hit us. Who's driving the planet? It's whirling through space at 300-something thousand miles an hour. Nobody's driving. Who am I? What am I? What's this whole experience about? We know nothing. We know nothing. I had a wonderful experience in New York City, actually, with this. Went with a devotee. We were going to originally, we stopped in New York City for a night. And we went to Central Park, and it was Saturday. And he wanted to take a nap, so we stepped over this little fence on the lawn, and he laid up there and napped. And I sat there and watched New York happen in front of me. And I was hit with this beautiful, beautiful understanding. I was sitting there watching all of these people playing croquet, playing the violin, singing a song, dancing to the people playing, a family walking along. And I was looking at all these people, and I just felt like Mother opened my heart for a moment and let me see her beautiful children like she sees her beautiful children. And she sat there in my heart like a mother and said, look at them. Are they not the most beautiful thing you see? None of them knows anything. All of them are filled with fear. This life is terrifying. And yet, look, every one of them has come up with a story that makes it worth living. Come up with an idea that made the day bearable. Come up with a means of showing love to their families, to their friends, to come out and enjoy the light, enjoy the sun. And Mother was just so pleased, just so happy that in the midst of all of this terror, in the midst of all this struggle, in the midst of all this pain and unknowing, every one of you has been able to create a life, an expression of love. And when we get to take all of these lines in a storybook of what our life is, right? Our life is a story of one of the manifestations of Satchidananda as it's being pushed through this mind and coming out on this side, distorted, different. It went in as pure love, it comes out as a story of love through limitation, right? Through restrictions and limitations. And so change the lens, let it come out with no with no limitations. You've got infinite love, so stop deciding who deserves it. Just give it. Just give it to everyone. Don't let your ego be offended, and they should apologize first. No, ego's the one that did that. You know, that person never. Right? That's ego. And that's what makes us take an infinite supply and make it rare. So that we have to run around begging each other, like, love me, care about me. And we feel so alone in that, so unnecessarily. So this is, as I've understood it so far, how Mother's playing, what Mother is up to, and how she enjoys it, as each of you enjoy yourself. Love yourself. Isn't perfect as we might seem to be. You are an expression of divine love. And at the end of this grand experience, Mother's going to take those billions of lines of what love can look like under all these millions and trillions of experiences and expressions, and put them in one big embrace that is her very own self. So you, just living your life, are a pure expression of love through your set of limitations and restrictions.
You guys like to ask some questions? I think this is a satsang, so we can have a give and take.
Thank you for sharing all that. It was
So
very
generous.
enlightening. Appreciate that so very much, you sharing your story.
So,
And I know you mentioned the Eckhart Tolle. Well, that was sort of before all this was my Bible for like 10 years, the New Earth. So I appreciate that reference too, because it's all very validating to everything you just said as well,
yes.
to bring me here today. So
Yes, I actually personally have a very deep respect of Eckhart Tolle. I had his book, The Power of Now, for
Mhm.
many years, and I refused to look at it because I have a real defensiveness around quasi-spirituality, you know.
right.
And not that I'm blaming him for that, but if I don't know it, then it's quasi-spirituality.
Right.
You know, it's like, and so I didn't read his book for a long time because I don't want those ideas that aren't from an enlightened soul,
Right.
that I feel faith in their enlightenment, to build my spiritual world, because I'm very susceptible to story. And so I didn't want, very careful about that. When I finally, it was probably 12 years into my monastic experience, that I gave myself permission to pick up that book and actually read it. Wow, did I take a big jump in my growth. Not because he said anything new, but because he said it in such a new way.
Right.
That slipped past a lot of my defenses and a lot of my ignorances where I had heard it in a certain way, and now when it came in a fresh way, it got behind the filter. I was like, whoa, what was that? So I really enjoyed that. The Power of Now is the one that I really enjoyed. It's still referenced quite a bit.
You know, he was a student of A Course in Miracles.
Oh,
Did you ever become familiar with that?
I have not, but I was invited to A Course in Miracles class back in the late 90s, about 3 years before I took my fateful trip to India. And I went that day. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but something someone said or the way
It's a
somebody did.
self-study course.
Yeah.
The inner will speak to you. When you start reading,
Right.
he speaks to you
Uh,
directly, the Christ.
yes.
And he says all through, I don't know why people insist on having the, you know, in group study, because it all becomes arguments and debates.
Right.
It doesn't work. But that's something to look into as a self-study. You'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think if you like Eckhart Tolle and he's a devout student,
Sure.
likely you would like the source.
Yes, to be honest, I won't do that.
Okay.
Not for any reason about it being right or wrong, but that I've chosen my path at this
Oh,
point.
it's not a separate path. It is this
Right. Yeah.
in a new language.
Yeah. I hear that, and I believe that, and I have that trust in that as well. But for myself, at some point, I kind of realized, or not realized, I just said to myself, okay, you've got to stop collecting at some point, because there's enough information on the first 5 pages of any
Right.
scripture
Right.
to bring you to enlightenment. You know, it's not what you know. Having the philosophy down, knowing all the right words, being able to list all of the this, that's, and the others is not going to take you 1 millimeter closer to God until you digest.
You've chosen the path already too.
Yes. Well, yes, and I think Mother's got you right where she wants you. You know, that's the beautiful thing. When I was up at Holy Cross Monastery, one of the monks there shared a book with me called Love Wins. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's basically, there's a large movement within the Christian theology. This is a non-existing group, but these people who write these Christian books, there's a movement there that believes that nobody goes to hell. That in the end, everybody comes home. And of course, Vedanta teaches that from the beginning, and that was one of the beautiful things that I've always known had to be. You know, when I tell my old Christian friends, you know, I tell them, I said, really, there's 2 things that I cannot return to Christianity as it's being presented nowadays. I said, one is to talk about a God of unconditioned love, and then an eternal hell. Those 2 things simply don't go together. They simply cannot go together.
Coexist.
You know, and so there was that problem, and then the second one's very similar. I said to have an infinite punishment for a finite crime committed in ignorance is another thing that love simply would never come to that. Because I mean, I thought about it, I was like, which is utterly true. I mean, suppose I'm a Christian and I die and I go to heaven, but all of my friends, all of my family are over there being actively poked with a sharp stick by the guy I love the most. You know, and I'm like, how am I going to enjoy even one meal under those circumstances, knowing that the one I love the most is over there poking all my friends with a burning stick, you know, making sure that they suffer forever. And simply, clearly not possible.
Would you consider that perhaps over the thousands of years, the interpretations of some of these older books, particularly the biblical versions rather than Hindu versions, they've changed in meaning and interpretation? Hell may have been a physical location that was referred to where, you know, the diseased person went. And then later on, over the 2,000 years, it just developed a whole different meaning on purpose. Well, maybe intentionally. So you can't
I
really
absolutely-
rely on the interpretations.
Exactly. And that's where I've come to myself. And actually, Brother Richard up at Holy Cross Monastery, who was one I studied the most with. He was a doctorate from Oxford, so I felt very confident in his theology. And he had me reading many of the books of the early church fathers, which my tradition had excluded. They just took the Bible and left all of that other literature. And when I told that to Richard, he was like, how in the world did they do that? I mean, it's out of all of that literature that we know the Bible. It's like, you can't cut that stuff off and just take the Bible. And anyway, he was saying in there, he said a couple of things that were quite shocking to me, actually. One of the things he said to me was that in the first 7 meetings where the church as an institution was formed and the Bible was defined, the first 7 meetings were either presided over or called by the emperor, not Christians, not people within the respected structure of Christianity at that point, but by
Constantine.
by Constantine. And then he says, in doing that, you have to understand that period of time, Rome was in decline. It was losing its cohesiveness and becoming rather broken. And he said that he believed that most of those rules, the idea of one life and only one life, because that was not an accepted idea within early Christianity, that you only have one chance and that hell is eternal, that all of those ideas sprang up at that time. And he says, is it not clear that they were sprung up in order to hold you, to bind you to this religion, which he was now using to bind his empire together?
And
So it
right
was
from
more of a
wrong.
political move,
Yes.
using religious as
Which
a
is it not
weapon.
constantly
Right.
going on, constantly going on. And so, and then, with the idea that they, they basically outlawed enlightened people. If you were enlightened, anything that involved a direct line between you and God was suspect, and you either had to talk your way out of it, or you simply were killed for it. And so, if you run an institution like that, getting back to your original proposition that God is love, love wins.
So I was curious, so when you spend this time, about trying to take Vedanta and Christianity and trying to see the commonality, did you find that they were aligned with the different yogas that we had in Hinduism, or was it more of the Bhakti yoga that you could align with? Or
Well, it is definitely a bhakti yoga.
okay,
Christianity is a perfect instantiation of bhakti yoga. And actually, this is another thing I like to, when I'm picking a fight, I hope I'm not offending anybody, but, if I'm picking a fight with a Christian, I like to use that as a shock statement. I said, Christianity didn't add a single piece of spiritual knowledge that was not already available in the world's religions, in the world's teachings. There was nothing new introduced by the Christ. His story is very much similar to the teachings of all of the great sages, where love is that one most important thing. The elimination of ego is the dire need of the hour for us.
And forgiveness.
Yes, well, the grace, but the grace is in all traditions.
Right. No,
Yeah.
it's nothing new, but
Yeah.
it needed to be re-emphasized at the time.
Yes, for that group of people, that's right. Each time,
That particular location,
yes,
and we were at the dawn of the Iron Age. He was born just before the start of Iron Age. And it just so happened to be taking place in constellation Pisces, which made it particularly dark because it's dark oceans. So that was a huge task. Mentally, I think human consciousness wasn't ready for anything intellectual. So lessons had to be very simple.
I was with you up until that. We can't put humanity in a group and talk about it as a singularity. Because at that same time, there was Ramas and Buddhas and Krishnas all running around the world.
We're talking 2,000 years ago at the start of There were ones that came before this era. This was a particularly dark era. We've just now come out of it. But we went through a little over 2,000 years of a really, really, really dark era.
Yeah, except
2,000
that,
years.
right, within our Western experience, that narrative can be applied. But there are places in the world that did not go through that history and did not share those turmoils. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's cyclical, so it goes up
Yeah,
and
but
down.
we're not experiencing it as a group. We're experiencing it as subgroups.
Yeah, and individually too. I
Right.
mean, there's global and then there's subgroups and there's individual. I agree with that.
Yeah. And almost anything when you get to I mean, this changes the conversation a little bit, but anytime that the bigger your group that you're representing with your singular statement, the bigger that group is, the less true what you're saying.
That's right.
And as soon as you say global humanity, I know the next words are going to be drivel. You know, and it's like, okay, all right, that can be said, but not for that reason.
But I do recommend look at the history, global history of the last 2,000 years.
And
I mean, India,
I
for
agree.
instance, went through 500 years of colonialization, 250 by the French, 250 by the English, and that's just the last 500 years that we're looking at. It's dark and grim. I'm not talking about the teachings. I'm talking about what human beings endured. I'm not talking about
yeah, but even in, and we don't need to get too deep into this, because
No.
I'm going to be with you all the way through, and we're not going to fight, obviously. But the thing we have to be careful about is that all narratives are constructed, and that history is big enough that you can pick out the pieces that help your point and write your book, and then you become the narrative of that history. But in fact, that history is the same history as each one of our lives. And there is always the same amount of suffering as there is pleasure in a life. It says that is a given. There's always the same amount of both of things in the world. If you know, and that's really where our karma comes from. You know, in the sense that if you steal some pleasure, then you have to pay for it. And so it's
Give it to God. You're out of anything but.
yes, ultimately give up everything, and we'll all come back, but in a very different way. We'll have no singularity to accept it. You'll be the gift. So,
I got a question.
yeah.
You said something that you were relating that experience that happened to you with Moksha Pranaji, and she was coming towards you, and then you kind of just stopped and then told us that you entered the monastery because of it. So what was the final? You kind of
Okay.
skipped that
I
part.
did. That's the most important part.
Yeah. That's
What was the turning point?
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
happened exactly? At
Well,
that?
what happened was, and it was the lesson I was really building up to, and then dumped. Didn't even give it.
See,
In this notion of what it means when how does God talk to us? You know, when I did this 2-year experiment in Colorado, that was my biggest problem. You know, the first night in my new room, I had to rent a room for the first time in 26 years. So I rented a little room and I set up my little shrine that first night there, and I sat in front of the shrine and I looked at Mother and I was like, right, well, here I am. I said, I have no idea what to do. I said, I don't know what you want. I said, all of this has happened quite miraculously. I've been given permissions to do things that nobody else has ever been given permissions to do. I said, but I don't know what you want. And the first thing that was that I say Mother says, and I don't want you to get the impression that Mother is supernaturally talking to me, but the Mother works in a very interesting way. One of the things Ramakrishna says in the Gospel is that which arises in pure mind or silent mind is the voice of the divine. And Mother showed me that the very next morning after this prayer. And so I said, okay. So I decided that I will lay my stuff out to you, and then I will just simply sit in silence until I get an answer from you. And so the first thing that I really understood or learned, and then it comes back to this thing that happened in this vision, is that God doesn't speak in sentences. He's always represented that way because how else would you represent it? You know? He doesn't speak, that doesn't speak or communicate in sentences. God communicates in knowing, in knowings. And so when you ask God for, well, for instance, I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Nothing. And I sat on the second day. I sat almost the whole time just in silence, waiting, because part of that practice was that I committed to waiting and not asking another question until that one was taken care of. And so I was set to wait a year if I had to sit there listening, but unfortunately I only had to wait a day, because the next day I just knew. There wasn't an explanation, there wasn't a sentence. I just knew that my only responsibility in life, now or ever, will only ever be to stay here in the shrine of the heart, in the presence of the divine, in the presence of the beloved. She said, you stay there. And in my mind, I feel a poke in my chest with her finger. You, because she was very serious about it, you stay there. That is your job. I will do the rest. The rest is none of your business. You stay there. So that was the first thing that I learned. And that knowing, that knowing that comes to you is just a knowing. It's just, I was explaining to somebody that Vedanta, one of the unique things as I learned the Vedanta, was that every time I got these new teachings, they always sounded oddly familiar in a way that I had somehow forgotten. That there's just, I always felt like what I was telling you guys earlier, that somebody reached into me and pulled out all my aha moments and organized them and handed them back to me in an organized essay. It's like, I always knew that, but I could never have said that, never been ventured. And so that same kind of knowing, that's how you recognize truth. It doesn't have to be proven. It doesn't have to be demonstrated. It's something that it fits perfectly within you, and you know this is true. And so in that vision, the way it came across is Moksha Prana, because so we left Moksha Prana standing at the light, and I'm sitting on the stool with no body. Moksha Prana walks to me, disturbing nothing, like everything in the dream or in the vision is separate from her. She comes up, and to the ear of my ear, because I don't have an ear, I'm just the self itself in the vision anyway. She says to me directly, okay, so there were no words, or with the words, because she only said 2 words. She said, "It's okay." So that's all she said. But with those 2 words, she gave me everything that formed them in her. All of the thoughts, all of the experiences, all that she had that had told her that everything was okay and that she wanted to tell me it's okay. Everything that she had came with it, so that I didn't have to interpret the words, I didn't have to understand the words. I knew, as if I had always known, probably with reality had always known, that it is okay, and it's okay all the way down. That your most primordial fear of existence is unnecessary. It's okay. And when she whispered those 2 things to me directly, and I say that because it was very humorous to me after that experience, how awkward we have to spend our lives trying to tell each other things. Because I can tell you all this stuff, and I have a huge history in it, a huge investment of all the different angles of what I'm talking about. And all I can do is sputter out these funny little sounds, from this mouth. That's all I can give you, is a bunch of little wah, wah, wah. And then your mind takes wah, wah, and projects everything on it, all of your own experience, all of your own history, all of your own ideas. And we both sit there looking at each other with all of our fingers crossed, like, do you understand? And how can you know? You're like, yeah, I understand. Oh, okay. And now we've pretended that we've communicated, that we understand each other, and we go forward without fighting. But in reality, we have no idea. if it wasn't for the fact that we really are a unity, we couldn't communicate at all, because we would have no way of having the similarities necessary to understand. And so it's another piece of evidence.
Experiential.
Yeah,
It's experiential.
right. And so this idea of the words, it was a very profound moment when she gave me those two words, "It's okay." And what happened was actually I came to laying on the floor in a fetal position, crying so hard I couldn't breathe in the room with her. And I didn't get up because I couldn't stand up, because I was literally crying that hard. And I just crawled around the desk next to the flowered mandala, the woman who was doing it. And I just laid there sobbing, just saying over and over and over again, "My teacher, my teacher, my teacher, my teacher." Because for the first time I had a teacher, somebody who was actually showing me something that I desperately needed, and it was the first time that I had ever felt that experience. And I just sat there, and I've laughed at it many times with Mother. I'm like, wow, what is this, this talking thing, this having? And that's why I think Ramana Maharshi, he did, Swami Chidbrahmananda, who is a sadhu, a very ancient sadhu in Bellarmine, that I met when I went over there for my sannyas. And he was a beautiful, very old Swami, very large man. And he was a brahmachari magnet. All the brahmacharis, all the young boys would just follow him like a flock of geese everywhere he went on the campus. And he was telling us one night, we were all in his room sitting and listening to his stories, that he had moved into Ramana Maharshi's ashram. He went there to join, to become a monk. And he went to Ramana Maharshi, and Ramana Maharshi said to him, "No, I am not your guru, but you wait here. Your guru will come and get you." And he waited there for 2 years. And in that second year, two sadhus from Bellarmine came to visit Ramana Maharshi. And before they got there, Ramana Maharshi called Damodarananda and said, "Get yourself ready, your guru is coming today." And so those guys showed up late in the afternoon, and when they finished and they were leaving, Ramana Maharshi told Damodarananda, "You go with me." And so he went, and he was telling us that night on the floor of that room, we were all sitting there listening to such a beautiful room. He was sitting there talking about that experience of seeing Ramana Maharshi and talking to him, and he said, "I was a very diligent student, and I would take voracious notes on everything that I was reading and put my questions together for that time that I got with Ramana Maharshi one-on-one." And he said, even though it happened every time, I never learned it. He says, I never ever asked a single one of those questions, because he said that Ramana Maharshi would always require that I just sit in front of him silently, that we would just sit there in silence together. And he said, in that silence, every one of my questions seemed absurd. He says, I understood that they belonged to the dream and not to the dreamer. And so I think that's why it's such a clunky thing to communicate with each other that way, because it's not necessary. It's not necessary.
Any other questions or anything you want to say? Justin, you okay? He's way back there.
Such a heartfelt, delightful talk. Thank you. This was so generous for sharing all this.
So, yes, well, I can't really sit here and take credit like that. Yes, Mother has given us so
Yes.
much. I'm very happy to share it. And I'm looking so forward. I have such a grand hope inside, because this has been 26 years of my life, and I'm so excited, because I'm like, I wouldn't have believed you 26 years ago if you told me that I could experience the world inside that I experience now. That I could not have had the possibility without believing in such a thing. I couldn't have seen such a thing. And I have not even begun. So Swami Brahmananda, that's one of the most exciting things he said was that spiritual life begins at Nirvikama Samadhi, which is to say you will fall in love with the beloved every day for the rest of eternity. You will be more in love than you were the day before, and you will never exhaust that possibility, because love is infinite. Love is infinite. And your meditation, it's such a scratchy little thing that we do to sit there and repeat that name and knock at the door. But the whole time that you're doing it, it's a flower that's blossoming. At some point, Mother will just step aside and show you this beautiful place that she's made for you within your own self. You don't have to wait to go till you die or till you learn or till you do anything. It's yours, 100% yours, free, absolute gift of grace. And you will never finish opening it. You will never finish. This is the potential of what we're living. This is the reality of what this experience of life is. All the rest, bundle it up and toss it away. Cease the narrative. Open your gift.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Swami. It's really a pleasure. I think everybody is kind of just absorbing this, and I mean, when you share from such a deep part of yourself, like you just have, it's so appreciated. And thank you so much.
What else to do?
Yeah, but it's rare sometimes. Well, luckily, because I was somehow he was kind enough to agree to my demand, so that he stay another day. So tomorrow we have Swami yet again, and tomorrow, so we have a 5 o'clock. We're gonna do. Did I do that right? Yeah, 5 o'clock. So we're gonna do an RT and some bhajans, some singing, and then at 6 p.m. because I forgot, the talk is scheduled to start at 6, and it's gonna be one grand renunciation. Is that right?
Yes, it's actually going to be just a bunch of things that Brother Lawrence, have you ever read the Practice of the Presence of God? Good. Well, it's basically a lot of his experience, his life. And I found it immensely inspiring. When I found out, that I so encourage you to read it. It's a very small book, very easy read, nothing difficult about it, but one of the most profound books I've ever read. And it's on bhakti, the love of God, because he was a Christian monk. And anyway, I'm tempted just to jump in.
He's excited to do it. So definitely, I encourage you all to come. At 5 p.m. we have RT and meditation and some bhajans. 6 p.m. he'll start his talk. We'll do it right at 6, so we start the YouTube channel, the live stream then. So look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Of course, stay for Prashad tonight, and there's flowers for you to put on the altar also. So thank you so much. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much. Jan, thank you. And I get to spend time with Maharaj too. I'm so greedy.
We have a sleepover too.
Yeah, right. Bring your jammies, right?
We're having a jam party. Let's do this.
Okay, thank you all. I'm gonna turn off the live stream. Thank you for all who are on YouTube. Namaskars. See you tomorrow. Okay.